Welcome to Global English Podcast. I'm Maya, and I'm here with my travel-loving friend, Sarah. Today, we're sharing a story that every traveler can relate to. What happens when your restaurant order goes completely wrong in a foreign country?
Oh my gosh, Maya, this story still makes me cringe, but it's definitely a learning experience I'll never forget.
So, Sarah, tell our listeners what happened during your trip to Florence, Italy.
Okay, so I'd been walking around Florence all day, visiting the Duomo, the Uffizi Gallery, crossing the Ponte Vecchio. My feet were absolutely killing me, and I'd barely eaten anything since breakfast, except for a quick espresso and cornetto at a cafe near the cathedral.
Sounds amazing.
It was, but by evening I was completely exhausted and starving. I was walking back to my hotel when I found this cute little trattoria tucked away in a narrow side street. It wasn't touristy at all, which I thought was perfect, and the smell coming from the kitchen was just incredible. Fresh herbs, garlic, something bubbling that smelled like heaven. There were maybe 6 small tables, fairy lights strung up outside, and I could hear Italian voices and laughter from inside. I thought, perfect, this is going to be the authentic Italian experience and the highlight of my day.
I can imagine.
So I sit down and this lovely waiter comes over. He had a warm smile, but I could tell his English wasn't super strong. And honestly, my Italian is basically non-existent except for ciao and grazie.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
Right, so let me act this out for you. The waiter approaches, and I'm trying to be polite and clear. I said, "Good evening. I'd like to order the pasta bolognese, please. And could I have a glass of water?"
That sounds perfectly fine to me.
I thought so too, but then he looked confused and said something in Italian. I tried again, speaking slower. "Could I have the bolognese and a glass of water, please?"
Uh-huh.
You know what made it worse, Maya? I was trying to be so careful with my pronunciation. I had practiced saying bolognese in my head like 10 times before the waiter came over. Bolognese. I was so proud that I remembered the Italian pronunciation. He nodded enthusiastically and walked away. I thought, okay, great, problem solved. But Maya, 20 minutes later, he brings me this huge pizza covered in mushrooms.
Oh no, so you were actually being really thoughtful about the pronunciation.
Exactly. But here's what I think happened. When I said bolognese, he heard me correctly, but when I gestured while asking for water, I must have been pointing toward the pizza oven without realizing it. And maybe my accent made glass sound like something else entirely. Communication isn't just about words. Body language and context matter so much. And here's the worst part. I'm allergic to mushrooms. Not deathly allergic, but they make me really sick. So I'm sitting there, staring at this pizza, and I have no idea what to say.
Oh no, that must have been so stressful.
I was panicking inside. The waiter looked so proud of himself, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But I was also thinking, I can't eat this. I'm hungry, and I don't know how to explain the problem politely.
Right, exactly.
So I tried to signal him over, and when he came back, I attempted to explain. I said something like, excuse me, this is not what I asked for. I wanted pasta, not pizza."
That's actually pretty direct though.
Yeah, looking back, it probably sounded rude. He looked hurt and confused. Then I made it worse by pointing at the mushrooms and saying, "I can't eat mushrooms. They make me sick."
Oh dear.
The poor guy looked so embarrassed. And honestly, I was getting red in the face too. But then this older waiter, maybe the owner, came over and saved the day. He spoke much better English.
Thank goodness for that.
I am so sorry, miss. There has been a misunderstanding. What would you like to order? And I felt so relieved. I said, I think there's been a mistake with my order. I originally wanted pasta bolognese, but I received this pizza with mushrooms. Could you please change it?
Now that's much better phrasing.
Right? He was so understanding. He immediately took the pizza away and brought me the most amazing bolognese 15 minutes later. And you know what? He didn't even charge me for the mistake.
That's wonderful. So it had a happy ending after all.
It did. But Maya, I learned so much from that experience about how to handle restaurant problems politely. I wish I had known the right phrases from the beginning.
That's exactly why we wanted to share this story. Let's break down the useful expressions that can help our listeners avoid Sarah's awkward situation. First, let's look at polite ways to order food.
Yes.
Sarah used two great phrases, I'd like to order and could I have. These are both polite and clear. I'd like to order the pasta bolognese, please, is perfect for stating what you want. And could I have a glass of water is a polite way to make a request.
Those phrases worked great. The problem wasn't with my English, it was just a misunderstanding.
Exactly. Now, what about when things go wrong? The key is to stay polite but clear. Sarah eventually used the perfect phrase, I think there's been a mistake with my order.
That phrase was a lifesaver. It doesn't blame anyone directly.
Exactly. It's much better than saying, you got my order wrong, or this is wrong. Other polite options include, this isn't what I ordered, and could you please change it? Both are firm but respectful.
Right, those sound so much better than what I said initially.
Now, Sarah mentioned she's allergic to mushrooms. If you have food allergies or dietary restrictions, it's crucial to ask about ingredients before ordering. A simple question like, does this dish contain nuts, can prevent serious problems.
Oh my gosh, yes! I should have asked that from the beginning. That would have saved so much trouble.
Before we continue with more phrases, let's talk about cultural differences in restaurant dining. Sarah's experience highlights something important. Every country has different dining customs. In Italy, for example, dinner often starts later than in other countries, sometimes as late as 8 or 9 p.m. You can also say, I'm allergic to, or I can't eat, followed by the ingredient. For example, I'm allergic to shellfish, or I can't eat dairy. Restaurant staff usually appreciate knowing this information up front.
That's so true. I learned that the hard way. I showed up at 6 p.m. thinking I was being smart by avoiding the dinner rush, but the restaurant was practically empty. I felt like such a tourist.
And that brings us to another important topic, understanding local dining times and customs. In Spain, dinner might not start until 9 or 10 p.m. In Germany, many restaurants close their kitchens early, around 8 or 9 p.m. In France, there's often a specific lunch hour from 12 to 2 p.m., and dinner service doesn't begin until 7 p.m. at the earliest. Finally, when you're ready to pay, remember the polite phrase, "Can I get the bill, please?" In American English, we say bill, but in British English, they say check. Both work internationally. So here are some useful phrases for navigating these cultural differences. You can ask, what time do you start serving dinner? Or, what are your kitchen hours? If you're unsure about local customs, try, what time do most people eat dinner here? These questions show respect for local culture and help you plan better.
Good to know. I actually did use that phrase correctly at the end of my meal. Oh, Maya, that reminds me of another embarrassing moment. After my bolognese finally arrived and I finished eating, I wasn't sure about tipping. I ended up asking the waiter directly, which felt so awkward.
Tipping can be so confusing when you're traveling. Let's clear this up for our listeners. Tipping customs vary dramatically around the world. In the United States, 18 to 20% is standard for good service. But in many European countries like Italy, France, and Germany, service is often included in the bill, and you might just round up or leave a few euros as a gesture. In Japan, tipping can actually be considered rude. In Australia and New Zealand, tipping isn't expected but is appreciated for exceptional service. In some Middle Eastern and Asian countries, a small tip is common but not mandatory. When in doubt, you can always ask your hotel concierge or do a quick internet search for local customs. Is service included in the bill? Or what's the usual tip here? If you want to leave a tip, you can say, "Keep the change, please," or "The service was excellent, thank you." These phrases help you navigate payment customs gracefully. Now, phrases for when something goes wrong. I think there's been a mistake with my order. This isn't what I ordered. Could you please change it? And questions about ingredients. Does this dish contain nuts? I'm allergic to seafood. Finally, asking for the bill. Can I get the bill, please? Now let's practice some cultural and timing questions. What time do you start serving dinner? What time do most people eat dinner here? And tipping questions. Is service included in the bill? Keep the change, please.
This has been so helpful, Maya. I think our listeners now have a complete toolkit for dining abroad, from ordering politely to handling problems gracefully, and even understanding cultural differences.
Absolutely. And here's one final tip for our listeners. Don't be afraid to show appreciation for good service. Simple phrases like, "This was delicious, thank you," or "I really enjoyed my meal" can make a server's day, regardless of the country you're in. Positive interactions often lead to memorable experiences.
Excellent practice session, Maya. I wish I had known all these phrases during my Florence adventure. That's such great advice. And, looking back at my Florence experience, even though it started with confusion and embarrassment, it ended up being one of my favorite travel memories. The restaurant owner was so kind, and I felt like I had connected with the local culture in a meaningful way. Sometimes our mistakes become our best stories.
Well, now our listeners are prepared for their own restaurant experiences abroad. Remember, the key is to stay calm, be polite, and don't be afraid to ask for help when there's a misunderstanding.
Absolutely. And honestly, most restaurant staff want to help you have a good experience. They're usually very understanding when problems arise.
That's such a great point, Sarah. Most of the time, these situations end well when we communicate clearly and kindly. So, to our listeners, don't let language fears stop you from exploring amazing restaurants around the world.
Exactly. And you know what? Even embarrassing moments like mine can turn into great stories and learning experiences.
So true. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Global English Podcast for more real-life English stories. We love hearing your own travel experiences, so feel free to share them in the comments below.
And remember, practice makes perfect. Try using these restaurant phrases in your daily English conversations. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep practicing your English and keep traveling with confidence. Bye for now.